The Revengeance mod is awesome. I want to showcase a level that I think has examples of almost everything good about this mod. That level is RURIN'S Throne. As you might already have noticed, this level's name has been changed from Bulgar's Throne. This is because Revengeance changes the canon story in some places, giving spotlight to characters from the previous games that could or should have been in Vengeance. In this mod, Rurin Longbeard is the king. He even references his old line in Frontiers, Longbeards still fight. He has a hidden mechanic that's also present in the base game. I won't spoil what it is just yet, but in order to counteract the mechanic, I'm going to build as many towers as I can with my gold. That way, if I end up with a sudden influx of gold, I can spend it all on upgrades right away. One thing that I always do before I start building my towers though, is moving the hero to the place I want them to be at when the wave actually starts. That way they can start moving as I build all of my towers, and then I can press the call wave button as soon as possible. It's just a little bit more efficient. Anyways, let's skip ahead here to when I call the first wave of the level. The first wave here is completely different from how waves usually are in the original Vengeance. Multiple enemies spawn, and in formations too, rather than just trickling out one at a time and slowly. You see, the next wave is already here, and it's my intention to speedrun this entire level, so I'm going to be calling all of the waves immediately, or at least once I've recharged all of the spells that I plan on using before calling that wave. But it's going to be as close to a speedrun as possible, at least for now. One thing that you're going to notice here is that I'm using Demon Guards. If you don't know, all of the stats point to the Hellion Tridents being much better than the Demon Guards in the original Vengeance. The whole point of having two different options for your reinforcements to choose from is completely ruined because there's one choice that's clearly better. However, in this game, I think that the choices are actually really difficult to make. Both reinforcements have increased duration, so you can have 2 at a time if you spawn them fast enough. Demon Guards get even more duration, so you can have 3 at a time or even more if you call the waves early. They also trigger Infernal Combustion just for timing out, so you always benefit from the increased explosion damage that guards have. But every time I think about how good that is, I also think about how good the buff to Hellion Trident's ranged damage is. Flying enemies are a lot nastier in this mod, so ranged damage has more utility. But most enemies are evil in this mod anyways. The Sulfur Alchemist has 750 HP on normal, when it only had 160 in Vengeance. It spawned alongside enemies in a way that makes it an actual threatening support unit. The Mecha Dwarf is also more threatening now. It has more HP, deals more damage, and takes more lives. So it's really important to throw everything you've got at it to make sure that it doesn't leak through. Wave 6 is coming up next, and it's a bit of a trap. Flying enemies and clockwork spiders who are fast spawn here. So the idea is to rush down your defenses and get a few leaks through. Thankfully, you as the player have the tools to deal with this as long as you use those tools properly. I saw a comment saying that because the enemies and waves were made harder, but the towers and heroes were made stronger, that the net change to difficulty was 0. Trust me, the difficulty has definitely increased. The only towers and heroes who got buffed were the weak ones. The goal was to achieve balance, so overpowered towers have been scaled back so that viability is more equal across the board. I won't act like everything is balanced perfectly, but it's a work in progress. The mod does have patches promised and is open to suggestions, but so far, it's a lot closer to being balanced than the original game was. I like to think that this mod is what Vengeance is like to the people who like Vengeance. But if I was being serious at hazarding a guess, I would say that people who think the game is fine probably just don't take the things we criticize Vengeance for that seriously. For example, Hero Micro is limited compared to the previous games because abilities get wasted if you move the hero during any part of their animation. That is an objective difference from the previous installments. But whether it is more annoying is subjective. Some people might just not care. Maybe there are people out there who prefer it that way. It's just my subjective opinion that this mod is better than the base game. Take a look at my gold to see an example of why that is. When you hold on to more than 500 gold in this level, Rurin will jump up to your counter and steal 100 gold. In the vanilla game, you needed 1000 gold and would only lose 10 of it. It was more of an Easter egg than a mechanic. And that's fine, but I also like how the mod adds another dimension of threats to pay attention to. Now let's skip ahead to when there are a lot more enemies, all of whom are closer to the exit. Some people might not like the increased difficulty, But in my opinion, this mod is at its best when push comes to shove. Calling the next wave early actually gives a significant amount of gold and spell cooldowns, which allows me to burst down the enemies with another soul impact. These clutch moments mean a lot more when you have all of these enemies on screen and so many viable options at your disposal. In the vanilla game, you had what felt like weak options to use against weak enemy forces. It left a feeling of mediocrity in the battles that took place. In Revengeance, you're using powerful tools at your disposal to defeat the powerful enemy forces. Not only does that feel a lot more epic, but it also makes each individual weapon you use feel more significant. Soul Impact is a powerful weapon. It took a lot of dangerous enemies to make me want to use it there, and as a result, make myself vulnerable now that I don't have it. But I have other weapons to choose from. I can use Varric, who is a lot more useful now. You might have noticed that his hero spell recharges faster. Now it feels like a secondary set of reinforcements. That's the useful, significant reward you get for choosing him instead of any other hero, who also has significant, useful tools to offer. So this choice has more meaning. That's an example of part of why I think difficulty and balance matter for a game. But that's probably not something I need to convince other people of. So instead, let's focus on the action at the moment. Right now, Wave 14 has just started. There's an alchemist that's surrounded by a bunch of tin-beard gunmen, but I'm able to, ironically, gun them down with relative ease. So now that alchemist is just isolated. Unfortunately though, another group of enemies is invading at the bottom here. It's a bunch of miners, or rather quarry workers, so they need to be wiped out. Luckily, Varric's ability to stun has just recharged, so he's able to slam down and stun all of them, so that way they can't make it any further, and then they get wiped out with relative ease. In the vanilla game, if those enemies were getting through to the end there wouldn't be much that you could do about it because your options are just so weak. If his ability was still charged and he was able to stun them, fair enough, but the towers and heroes' tools at his disposal would just be so relatively low on DPS that he still wouldn't be able to do much. You see there that the Mega Dwarf just got hit by the shadow mark of the archer. Currently it has 100% uptime, but I believe that's going to be nerfed on the next balance update for the mod to instead be every 10 seconds on a 6-second duration. So it wouldn't have the full 100% uptime that it currently has. It is still a broken option for bosses, and it's just kind of difficult to balance without just making it unable to be used on bosses. It's actually pretty unique to have an ability that can be used on bosses, since in Kingdom Rush Origins, Hunter's Mark, which is basically the same ability, doesn't work on them, but the Totem of Weakness in Kingdom Rush Frontiers does. However, that's more of a group debuff, so against a single enemy, it's not as efficient. It's only 40% bonus damage. Here though, it's 100% bonus damage, so any single attack is going to deal double the damage against a unit, which makes it a superb boss killer. Speaking of which, here comes the boss right now. Rurin has been buffed to have a little bit more HP and to have some armor now. His damage values have also been modified so that way they actually make sense. In the vanilla game, for basically no reason other than maybe accidental oversight, his melee attack deals explosive damage, whereas his ranged missile attack, which actually is an explosion, dealt physical damage. Here though, they've been swapped so that way it actually makes sense, and he is quite a tough boss. Look at the damage that he deals, or rather the DPS that he has, because he can just keep attacking back to back. Luckily though, because I know what is good against the boss, I'm able to burst him down with relative ease. So even though me speedrunning this level may have made it look a little trivial, it is still a challenge. And I recommend you try that challenge for yourself by downloading the mod and playing it blind if you can. Check the links in the description.